Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be back in LA, back in the studio. I've got the microphone a little bit closer to me now. Let me know if it's a little bit clearer, a little bit better audio. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? On a Thursday, Yom Hamishi, Stephen in New Hampshire, Yehuda in South Carolina, Joe in the Inland Empire, Sharon in New Jersey with Cy the Talmud Cat, Bill in mid-Missouri, Bella in Florida, Lucy in Minnesota, Shandora in the Bronx, Melissa in Great Neck Guy in Ohio, also Marjorie in Georgia, Ella in the house, Marie in Freeport. Welcome, everybody. Okay, it worked out very well. We had to skip a page. Oh, Yehuda, I think sound is great now. Awesome. So we had to skip our class yesterday when I was traveling. And now the next two pages are actually rather short. So we can get right back on schedule. A little bit of a preview what's coming up. Tomorrow, Friday, I posted this yesterday, no class. We'll be doing Loop Group on the movie. So that's where a group of actors, and I'll be directing, just doing the kind of background, people talking type of stuff. There's a gala scene in the movie. There's a Shiva scene in the movie. All the crowd scenes, the kind of background chatter. And then when there's a big emergency at one of those events, people panicking, etc. So it's a really interesting part of the process. At any rate, we're doing that tomorrow. No way around it. So no class tomorrow. And we'll resume on Saturday. Normal schedule after Shabbos ends in LA. Sunday, normal schedule, 6 p.m. Pacific. By then, there should be a new Masters winner for those who are interested. Then next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're going to be sound mixing the movie. So it looks like the schedule for that is going to push the class back 90 minutes, right? So just like when we were doing color timing on the movie 2 weeks ago, and we were an hour late every day, 7 p.m. Pacific. Next week, I think Monday to Thursday, it's going to be 7:30 p.m. Pacific. So 90 minutes later than usual. That's next week, Monday through Thursday. All right, let's get this going. We're doing a double daf, pages 42 and 43, here in Tractate Bava Metzia, the 22nd volume of the Talmud. We're working our way through chapter 3, tonight opening with Mishna number 8. In the case of one who deposited coins with another person, and the bailee, the custodian of the coins, bound the coins in a cloth and slung it behind him. And that bailee, or he conveyed them to his minor son or daughter for safeguarding, or he locked the door before them in an inappropriate manner, all of which is to say that this was insufficient care that he took when guarding these coins that were deposited in his safekeeping. So in all these cases, the bailee is liable to pay for the coins as he did not safeguard them in the manner typical of bailees. But if he did safeguard the money in the manner that bailees safeguard items, and it was nevertheless stolen, then he is exempt. So there's some kind of a reasonable bailee standard. If he's living up to the standards of most bailees when they're guarding other people's money, then he's not going to be liable for theft. But if he wasn't careful enough, then he will. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. So granted, for all the other cases, the bailee is liable to pay, as he did not safeguard the money in the manner that bailees safeguard items. But if the bailee bound it in a cloth and slung it behind him, well, what more was he to do? Right? So now we're getting a little bit of a peek into, the daily luggage, the briefcase, the backpack equivalent that people had in Talmudic times. I mean, if he bound the money in a cloth, slung it behind him, what does that mean? Sounds like, some kind of a bag, a pouch, on a string that's on his back, right? Some kind of backpack. So what is he supposed to do? And Rava says that Rabbi Yitzchak says, the verse states, and you shall bind up the money in your hand. Now there we're talking about Meiser Sheni, the second tithe, that when the temple was standing in Jerusalem, people would go up to the festivals, right? And when they're tithing their produce, first 2% to the Kohen, that's called teruma. The next 10% to the Levite, that's called Meiser or tithe, right? Meiser means the 10th. The word tithe means the 10th. And then the second 10th is for his own use when he goes on these pilgrimage festivals up to Jerusalem. So he has what to eat and drink, and so he can enjoy the festival. And about that, it says that if, for example, he's a farmer of watermelons, he's not going to carry a whole bag of watermelons. He can sell the watermelons. He would deconsecrate that second tithe from the watermelons, and the consecration would pass from that second tithe produce to the money for which it was exchanged. And now that money is second tithe money, can only be used for his needs when he's going on the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And about that second tithe money, the Torah says he shall bind it in his hand. So the sages are learning out from that verse in the Torah about second tithe that when you're going to be safeguarding money, you have to take extra caution, not just throw it into your backpack. You have to take extra precaution to guard it. The Torah says you will bind it in your hand. Now, is that what we really have to do? Literally tie it to our hand? The verse states, and you shall bind up the money in your hand, Deuteronomy 14:25. And from this it is derived, although it is bound, in order to safeguard the money, it must be in your hand. I mean, what? So a bailee has to carry the money around in his hand at all times? That sounds a little extreme. And apropos that verse, Rabbi Yitzchak says, a person's money should always be found in his possession. He should not invest all of his money, leaving him with no money available for expenditures. And it is stated, and you shall bind up the money in your hand. And Rabbi Yitzchak derives from this, and I had... I'm just spacing on his last name, but I had a guest on my podcast, Gary, his last name will come to me, but who is he's an investment advisor, and he actually, wrote an extensive article on learning investment advice from the sages of the Talmud. And it was this sugya, this teaching, that he learned it out from. This was his basic source. Says Rabbi Yitzchak, a person should always divide his money into three. He should bury 1/3 in the ground and invest 1/3 in business and keep 1/3 in his possession. So that's a Talmudic recipe for diversification of your portfolio. And obviously, you don't have to take it literally. So as Gary explained on my show, what does it mean 1/3 in the ground? So that's a very safe investment, right? Something that is it's just not going to go anywhere. And it could be real estate, probably means real estate. And 1/3 in business, right? So that money needs to be active, making money for you, like in the stock market, for example, or invest in your own business, right? So that you should grow that business, make a profit, and keep 1/3 in his possession. So that's kind of assets that you're going to keep safe for sure, but liquid, so that if you have sudden expenditures, you can get a hold of that money and not have to borrow. Or if you have an opportunity, that big business opportunity comes your way, you have what to invest with, right? So that's why even, for example, you have a stock portfolio, you want to keep some of your assets in cash so that if a great buy comes your way, you can go and make that purchase. And Rabbi Yitzchak says, further teaching from him, blessing is found only in a matter concealed from the eye. As it is stated, Deuteronomy 28:8, the Lord will command blessing with you in your storehouses, meaning where the grain is stored, right? And yesterday we were talking 2 days ago, we were talking a little bit about you have grain in the storehouse. Do you know exactly how much you have there? If you measured all of it before you put it in the storehouse, okay, then you've actually removed the opportunity for it to be a source of blessing for you. What this is getting at is don't be constantly counting, don't count your chips while you're sitting at the table. There'll be plenty of time for counting when the dealing is done. So you don't want to be somebody who's constantly checking his portfolio, constantly checking exactly what the value is, right? You have to have some trust in God. And if you put that trust in God, then you can see why Rabbi Yitzhak follows up his first teaching about, this three-way diversification. And then he also says, but don't be so obsessed with the value of your portfolio that you're always measuring it. Because if you do that, you're not sort of leaving room for God to bless you. God blesses us when we're not paying such close attention. He blesses us in what's hidden from our eyes. You have to leave a little bit of mystery there, and that's where blessing comes, where the grain is concealed. And the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught blessing is found only in a matter over which the eye has no dominion. As it is stated, the Lord will command blessing with you in your storehouses, right? The Lord will command blessing with you in your storehouses. And that means that the place where you don't have a precise measure of what's going on, where it's hidden from you. And we can extrapolate a little bit broader teaching, that from where will my help come? That's a psalm that we've been saying quite a bit, since the war began. Blessing 121, as well as Psalm 121 and Psalm 130. We're reading them every day, right? From where will my help come? My help comes from the maker of heaven and earth, right? So we only look to God for our redemption, for our salvation. We have to do our hishtadlus, right? That means we do our part. We have to do our work. It's not like, the old joke about the guy who keeps praying that he'll win the lottery, and a voice from heaven finally says, you keep praying you win the lottery. Meet me halfway. Buy a ticket, right? So you have to do your part. But then you have to really place your faith in the Lord, and the blessing will come from where you least expect it. The sages taught, one who goes to measure the grain in his threshing floor recites, may it be your will, O Lord our God, that you send blessing upon the product of our hands. If one began to measure the grain, he says, blessed is he who sends blessing upon the pile of grain. If one measured and afterward reciting this blessing, this is a prayer made in vain, because blessing is found neither in a matter that is weighed, nor in a matter that is measured, nor in a matter that is counted. Rather, it is found in a matter concealed from the eye. As it is stated, the Lord will command blessing with you in your storehouses. And a note here from Rav Steinsaltz, the sages also stated that blessing is not found in matters that create the impression that one is amassing a significant profit. For example, using large barrels. In general, God's blessing is bestowed discreetly. For example, in the incident recounted in 2 Kings chapter 4, Elisha instructed a woman to close the door before a miracle transpired to grant her oil, right? That was the woman who was very, very poor, and the prophet Elisha told her to, just get as many containers as you can, and then he started filling her containers with olive oil, and it just, filled every single container. And then that became a source of blessing, of some wealth for her and her son at a time when they were starving. But Elisha said, close the door, right? Close the door. It's not for everybody. It's not for every time. It's not for everything. But our eyes look to the Lord, and then the help will come, from where and when we don't expect. Now, Shmuel says, there is safeguarding for money only in the ground, right? So there's a real insight into the difference between our society and theirs. They were saying that the only real safe place to put your money is to dig a hole in the ground. Right? They didn't have banks like we do. Rava said, and Shmuel concedes, if one received a deposit on Shabbos Eve at twilight, right before Shabbos begins, that the rabbis did not impose upon him to bury the money in the ground immediately. And if at the conclusion of Shabbos he delayed and did not bury the money within the period of time needed to bury it, he is liable to pay the owner if it is stolen, right? So if you are charged with watching somebody else's money, you have to take what's considered the standard level of precaution. And at that time, it was to dig a hole in the ground where only you would know where it is. And of course, if you forgot where you put it, that would be the definition of negligence as a bailee. And if the one who deposited the money is a Torah scholar and the bailee thought perhaps he requires money for Havdalah, right, for the ritual, the ceremony after the end of Shabbos, and that is the reason that he did not bury the money immediately, then he may delay bearing the money a bit longer. And the Gemara comments, and now that rummagers, these are people who dig to find and steal buried property, are commonplace. Rummagers are commonplace. There is safeguarding for money only in the beams of the roof of a house. And you see the changing standards. At a certain point, the only way to safely guard money was to dig a hole in the ground. And then these rummagers came around, who were people going around digging holes, trying to dig up the money. And so now the standard of care changed. And so then safeguarding the money was only in the beams of the roof of a house. Says the Gemara, and now that dismantlers are commonplace, and these are people who attempt to find and steal money hidden in the beams of people's houses. So now the safeguarding for money is only between the bricks of a wall. Rava said, and Shmuel concedes, that money can be safeguarded in the wall, or alternatively between the corners of the house. But then the standard changed again, and now that tappers are commonplace, and these are people who tap on walls to find and steal property hidden there, there is safeguarding for money only in the handbreadth of the wall adjacent to the ground, or in the handbreadth of the wall adjacent to the ceiling, as tapping on the wall will not reveal their existence, right? Tapping, you won't hear that kind of echo and shake because the wall is more stable and sturdy where it meets the ground or where it meets the ceiling. I mean, you really, do people change that much over time? It's like, you know, we have a new world where there's digital currency, and as every time there's some kind of safeguard, some kind of measure to keep our digital identities, our digital currencies safe. So then there's some kind of a criminal, a hacker, a crook, who's trying to keep up and you know, keep up with the technology that's trying to keep him out. And he breaks through and he becomes a danger to our assets. And then the good guys are trying to advance the technology and stay one step ahead of him. And that's just the way it was 2,000 years ago. Rav Acha, the son of Rav Yosef, said to Rav Ashi, we learned in the Mishna there, Tractate Pesachim 31b, the legal status of chametz, right? So this is with Passover coming up, only a week away, more or less. Right, so chametz is the leavened bread that we're going to have to remove. All Jews have to remove from their houses, from their domains, from their possession for Passover. A Jew is not permitted to own any chametz, any leavened bread or leavened bread products during the holiday of Passover. So we learned in that Mishnah that the legal status of chametz, upon which a rock slide fell, is like that of chametz that was eliminated, as it will remain there forever. But you have to remove it from your house. We burn the chametz, or we burn what's left. What we really tend to do is sell the chametz. And in modern times, where it would really cause a big loss for people to just throw away, and get rid of all their chametz, what we do is remove it from the house, put it in a quarantined space. And then our rabbis will arrange an exchange where he will sell all the chametz of his congregation to a non-Jew, so that legally the non-Jew owns the chametz of that congregation during the holiday of Passover. And then at the end of Passover, the rabbi will buy it back from the non-Jew, and then everybody can bring their chametz back inside the house. Right? So that's removal. When we burn it, we eliminate it. Right, so what they're saying here is that chametz upon which a rock slide fell, that's like you removed it from your property because it's buried, right? It's buried under this rock slide, and we're not going to be able to get to it, so it's like we burned it. It's like we eliminated it. And why are they bringing that now? Just to talk about the depth in the ground that you can safely assume that something is out of reach, because we were talking about burying money and hiding it. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says this ruling applies in any case where the chametz is covered to the extent that a dog is unable to detect it. And it is taught how much is the measure of detection of a dog. How much can a dog sniff out of something that's buried? 3 handbreadths. So if it's under 3 handbreadths of rocks and dirt, that's beyond the smelling power of the dog. I don't know about rocks. Certainly if it's buried 3 handbreadths below, the dog is going to have trouble smelling it, but I wouldn't bet against the dog, right? But legally speaking, that's what we need, a depth of 3 handbreadths. And the question is, here, what is the law? Do we require the money to be buried at a depth of 3 handbreadths or not? And Rav Ashi said to Rav Acha, there, with regard to bread, it is due to the scent that we require 3 handbreadths to obscure it from the dog. But here, with regard to money, it is because it must be obscured from the eye of a human that we bury it. Scent is not relevant, and therefore we do not need 3 handbreadths of dirt above the buried money. And the Gemara asks, well, then how deep must the money be buried? And Rafram from Shechera said 1 handbreadth is enough to be considered that you're properly safeguarding money. This is advice when you're hiding your own money, but it's a legal requirement if you're acting as a bailee and safeguarding somebody else's money. And the Gemara relates, there was a certain man who deposited money with another, and the bailee placed it in a willow. And the bailee placed it in a willow hut, from which the money was stolen. Now, Rav Yosef said, although with regard to thieves, placing the money in the willow hut is effective safeguarding, with regard to protecting the money from fire, it is negligence, as it is likely to burn. This willow hut was considered a highly flammable object. Therefore, it is a case where the incident was initially through negligence and ultimately by accident, and the bailee is liable to pay. So note that it ended up being stolen. So he took proper safeguard to prevent it from being stolen, because putting it in the willow hut is not a place that a thief would think to look. It was proper care with regard to guarding the property from theft. However, putting it in that willow hut was negligent with regard to guarding that property from fire. And because he was negligent with respect to fire, even though it ended up being stolen rather than burned, the bailee is considered liable. And this is this classic case of something that began as negligence, and the damage ended up being caused by accident or by circumstances beyond his control, and he is going to be deemed liable, right? Liable, even though it's not that it burned, it was stolen, and he took proper precautions for theft, but because he was negligent with respect to fire, he ends up being liable for theft, right? And this is called something that is initially through negligence and ultimately by accident. That's a principle we're going to keep coming back to. So the bailee is liable to pay. And some say, although with regard to fire, it is negligence, with regard to thieves, it is effective safeguarding, and therefore is a case where the beginning of the incident was negligence, and ultimately the damage was caused by accident, and the bailee is exempt. Meaning that the sages disagree with each other on this principle. If something begins through negligence and ends up, the damage is caused by accident, some say he is liable and others say he is not liable. But we poskin, the ruling ultimately came out that if you begin with negligence and it ends up being, the damage is caused by accident, you are going to be liable because of the initial negligence, even though it was not that negligence that caused the damage. And the Gemara concludes, and the law is, in the case where the incident was initially through negligence and ultimately by accident, the bailee is liable to pay. Now, the Gemara relates, there was a certain man who deposited money with another. Eventually, the owner of the money said to the bailee, "Give me my money." And the bailee said to him, "I do not know where I placed it." And the matter came before Rava, who said to the bailee, "Every circumstance where a bailee claims, 'I do not know where I put it,' that is, in and of itself, negligence. Go pay." And the Gemara relates, there was a certain man who deposited money with another, and the bailee gave the money to his mother, and she placed the money in a chest, and it was stolen from there. And Rava said, how should judges rule in this case? Right? So he was asked to watch the money, and then because he couldn't watch it all the time, he asked his mother to watch it for him, right? So a sub-bailee, as it were. Is he going to be liable or not? So now we're going to try a few different outcomes. Let us say to the bailee, go pay. But he can say, there is a principle. With regard to anyone who deposits an item with another, it is with the awareness that at times the bailee's wife and his children will safeguard the item that he deposits it. Therefore, I was within my rights to give the deposit to my mother. Presumably she's a member of his household. We are on 42b now. So let us say to his mother, okay, he asked you to watch it. It was stolen from you. So we say to the mother, you go and pay. Well, she can say, my son did not tell me that the money is not his, so that I should bury it, which is the optimal method of safeguarding money. She didn't bury it because she didn't know she was a bailee for some third party. She just thought she was watching it for her son, and it was enough to put it in the chest. She wasn't aware that she needed to bury it in order to be at the level of safeguarding that you would use for some other person than her son. So rather, let us say to the bailee, why did you not say to your mother that the money is not yours? You're liable. Well, he can answer, all the more so that my omission of this information was preferable, as when I say to my mother that the money is mine, she is even more careful with it. Rather, Rava said the bailee takes an oath that he gave the money to his mother, and his mother takes a note that she placed the money in the chest and it was stolen, and the bailee is exempt from payment. Right? Remember, what our Mishna said is that if you take proper safeguarding precautions, then you're not liable for theft. Rather, Rava said the bailee. So the Gemara relates. There was a certain steward who acted on behalf of orphans, who purchased an ox for the orphans and passed it to the cowherd. And the ox did not have molars and other teeth with which to eat. And the ox died because it was unable to eat the standard food of oxen. So Rami Bar Chama said, how should judges rule in this case? Let them say to the steward, go pay for the dead ox. But he can say, I gave the ox to the cowherd with the expectation that he would take care of the cow, of the ox. So let us say to the cowherd, go pay for the dead ox. Well, he can say, I placed the ox with my other oxen, and I placed food before it. We did not know that it did not eat, right? I was asked to watch an ox. I placed the ox with all my oxen. I fed it along with all the other oxen. I didn't know that it didn't have teeth and was unable to eat. So the Gemara asks, after all, the cowherd is a paid bailee of the orphans, right? The orphans had a steward. The steward gave it to the cowherd. The steward is acting on behalf of the orphans. So therefore, the cowherd is a paid bailee of the orphans. So therefore, he had a higher degree of responsibility. He was required to examine the situation and ascertain if the ox was eating. And the Gemara answers, if there was a loss for the orphans, indeed, the cowherd would be liable to pay. And with what are we dealing here? It is a case where there is no loss incurred by the orphans, as they found the previous owner of the ox who sold it to them, right? When they initially bought this toothless ox, they went to the seller, and the orphans took their money back from him after discovering that the ox had this deficiency, right? So the orphans didn't lose anything. So the Gemara asks, okay, well, rather, who then claims compensation from the cowherd? The previous owner of the ox claims compensation from the steward. He should have informed us that the ox was not eating. And the Gemara answers, what would we inform the previous owner? He knows that it is a mistaken transaction, as he would be aware that the ox had no teeth. In other words, if the guy who sold the ox to the steward of the orphans, knowing that it was an ox without teeth, didn't inform the steward that it was a toothless ox, well, then it's the seller's fault that all of this happened. And the Gemara explains this is a case with regard to a trader who buys from here and sells to there and does not know the condition of the ox. The guy who sold the ox to the steward was a guy who buys and sells many oxen. He had no idea that this particular ox had no teeth. Therefore, the trader takes a note that he did not know about the ox's defect, and the cowherd pays the value of the meat of the ox based on the cheapest price available in the market. And that's a kind of compromise ruling of the sages to deal with this kind of complex scenario where we're trying to work out who should bear the loss. Now, the Gemara relates, there was a certain man who deposited hops, which are used in the production of beer, with another person. And the bailee himself had a pile of hops also. And the bailee said to his brewer, cast hops in the beer from this pile, meaning his own pile of hops, not the pile that he was watching for someone else. Well, the brewer went and cast from the other pile, the pile of the one who had deposited his hops with the bailee, and he used those for the beer. So Rav Amram said, how should the judges rule in this case? Let us say to the bailee, go pay. But he can say, hey, I said to him, meaning the brewer, take the hops for the beer from my pile, not that pile, from this pile. I showed him which pile to take from, and I showed him my pile. Okay, so let us say to the brewer, you go pay for the loss. Well, he can say, the bailee did not say to me, cast the hops from this pile and do not cast hops from that pile. I thought he was merely giving advice, and I did not know that he was insistent that I refrain from using hops from that pile. He said, use these hops. Maybe because he thought it was more, more proximate, closer to the brewery. But it ended up being more convenient for me because I was rolling by picking up other hops from other clients in my wagon, and that's why I took from that pile. I had no idea. I thought they were both piles that belonged to him. He didn't tell me take only from this pile to the exclusion of that pile. How was I supposed to know? So the Gemara asks, and the Gemara comments, and if the hops of the bailee were closer to where he and the brewer were located than those that were deposited with him, then the bailee should be liable, as if the brewer delayed bringing the hops for the period of time that it would take to bring the bailee hops from his own pile, and he did not yet bring them to him, it is assumed that the bailee understood that the brewer had gone to bring the more distant deposited hops. By not objecting, the bailee revealed that he was amenable to brewing the beer from the pile of hops that belonged to the depositor, the owner who deposited with the bailee. The Gemara answers, this is a case where he did not delay bringing the hops, or alternatively, the two piles were equidistant from the brewer. And the Gemara asks, ultimately, what loss is there? But doesn't the bailee profit in this case? Let the bailee give the owner beer equal to the value of the hops that he took from the deposit, and no one loses. Rav Sama, the son of Rava, said, the Gemara is referring to a case where the beer ferments and becomes vinegar. Therefore, it is impossible to take the value of the hops from the beer. And Rav Ashi said it is referring to a case where the hops were mixed with thorns and did not enhance the beer. Now, obviously, it's funny that not even suggesting, well, there were two piles of hops. He took from the wrong pile, but there's another pile of hops. So why not just replace the hops that were used for the brewing from the hops that didn't get used and give those to the depositor when he comes to claim it? And then we would fall back on what we learned a few days ago, that a person prefers 1 kav of his own produce to 9 kav of somebody else's produce. The guy deposited his produce. He wants his produce back, and maybe something happened to the other pile, etc. It's not so simple. And generally speaking, when are people fighting and litigating? When there is some kind of a loss, it's not easy to replace, and that's why we have to work out who should bear the loss. Now we're on page 43a. And he pays him the value of the hops mixed with thorns according to his profit. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 8. Now, Mishnah number 9 here in chapter 3. In the case of one who deposits money with a money changer, if the money is bound, the money changer may not use it. Therefore, if it is lost, he does not bear responsibility for it. Lost meaning circumstances beyond his control. So this is a little bit the difference between, modern times we have a bank, right, where we deposit money. So when you put money in the bank, there's 2 ways you could do it, right? You could put your money deposited in the account, and then you just get a receipt for how much money the bank is holding for you. And obviously the bank is going to make use of that money, right? It's going to lend that money at interest at a higher rate than the interest it's going to pay you for your savings account. And that's one of the ways in which the bank makes profit. So the bank is using your money. Alternatively, if you want to put money in a bank, you could rent a safe deposit box and put, your wads of cash or your bags of coins, whatever, in that box. And in that case, the bank will not be using your money. They're just going to be a safe place to stash your money. And so here, where you're depositing money with a money changer, that's kind of analogous to those two modes. And the difference is, when you give him the money, was it bound in such a way that it was evidence that you wanted to keep it bound and that the money changer should not make use of the money? Or did you just give him an amount of money, in such a way that would indicate to him he could use it while it was in his possession? So if it was bound, the money changer may not use it. Therefore, if it is lost, he does not bear responsibility for it so long as he was not negligent. So if the money was not bound, if it was unbound, then the money changer may use it for his own dealings, and therefore, if it is lost, he does bear responsibility for it. If he deposited money with a homeowner instead of a money changer, whether it is bound or whether it is unbound, the homeowner may not use it, as it never entered the mind of the depositor that the homeowner might use the money. You're asking somebody who lives in a house to watch your money for you. You're not thinking he's going to use it. That's different than if you deposit your money with the money changer. Therefore, if the homeowner lost the money, right, he wasn't negligent, circumstances beyond his control, he does not bear responsibility for it. If the bailee is a storekeeper, this is going to be like a hybrid between a money changer and a homeowner. If the bailee is a storekeeper, his status is like that of a homeowner. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, if the bailee is a storekeeper, his status is like that of a money changer. That's Mishnah number 9. Now the Gemara. The Gemara asks, why is it that due to the fact that money is bound, the money changer may not use it? Don't people typically bind their money? Binding is no indication that the intent of the one who deposited the money is that it should not be used. And Rav Asi said that Rabbi Yehuda said, it is a case where the money is bound and sealed, a clear indication that he does not want the bundle to be opened. That's where the Mishnah is. That is the case. That is the case of our Mishnah. Rab Mari says it is in a case where the money is bound with an atypical knot, also indicating that he does not want the bundle to be opened. There are those who say that there is a variant reading. Rab Mari raises a dilemma. What is the legal status of money bound with an atypical knot? Is it like the money that is sealed or not? And the Gemara concludes, taiku. We don't know. The atypical knot, is that considered sealed or not sealed? It was never resolved. New subject. The Mishnah teaches that if the money is unbound, the money changer may use it, and therefore he bears responsibility if it is lost. Rav Huna says, and even if it was taken from him under circumstances beyond his control, he is liable to pay. And the Gemara asks, but isn't it taught in the Mishnah? It is lost, from which it may be inferred that only if the money was lost does he bear responsibility, but not if it was taken by force. And the Gemara answers, this must be understood in accordance with that which Rabbah stated in a different context. As Rabbah says, they were stolen, and this is referring to a case where the items were stolen by force by armed bandits. They were lost. This is referring to a case where his ship sunk at sea, right? So we're getting a little more insight to what these terms mean. And Rav Nachman says, if it was taken from him under circumstances beyond his control, he is not liable to pay. Rava said to Rav Nachman, according to your opinion, that you said if it was taken from him due to circumstances beyond his control, he is not liable to pay. Apparently, the money changer is not considered a borrower with regard to the money, because remember, the borrower always pays if what he borrows is lost, no matter what the circumstances are. If he is not a borrower, he is not a paid bailee either. So why then does he bear responsibility for the money if it is lost? His status should be that of an unpaid bailee, and he should be exempt. And Rav Nachman said to him, in this case, I concede that he is a paid bailee, since he benefits from the money. It is with the benefit that the money changer derives based on the fact that if a profitable purchase would happen to present itself to him, he can purchase it with the deposited money, that he is considered a paid bailee with regard to the money. Even if he's not literally being paid to watch it, if the money was deposited with him with the understanding that he could use it, then the fact that he has more cash on hand and he's ready should that investment opportunity arise, that's valuable to him, and that takes him from the status of an unpaid bailee to a paid bailee. Rav Nachman raised an objection to the opinion of Rav Huna from a Mishna, tractate Meila. Now, this is the idea that if there's property that belongs to the holy temple, so it's under the supervision, under the care of the temple treasurer. Now, the general principle is something that has been consecrated, if you make personal use of it, that's a sin, that's a transgression, right? Anytime that you use, funds that were donated for charity to be given to the poor, and you as the charity collector end up using some of that for yourself, that's misappropriation of consecrated funds. It's not quite at the same level as when you actually use funds that were donated to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, where it's an explicit outright sin. Okay, now what about that? So with regard to the temple treasurer who deposits money with a money changer, if the money is bound, the money changer may not use it. Therefore, if he spent the money, the temple treasurer is not liable for misuse of temple property because he took the proper precaution. He bound the money before he handed it to the money changer. And then when the money changer used it, so the transgression is on him. And since he knew that it was deposited in his care by a temple treasurer, it's not just that he misappropriated funds for his own use. It's that he misappropriated holy funds for his own use, higher level transgression. Now, if the money was unbound, well, we just said unbound money deposited with a money changer, he may use it. Therefore, if the money changer spent the money, it is the temple treasurer who is liable for misuse of temple property, as the money changer serves as an agent for the treasurer in that situation. So Rav Nachman explains his objection from that Mishnah in Tractate Meila. If you say that even if the money was taken from the money changer under circumstances beyond his control, he bears responsibility for the money, why did the Tana of our Mishnah specifically teach that the temple treasurer bears responsibility if the money changer spent the money? Even if he did not spend the money, the treasurer should bear responsibility. Since the temple treasurer gave him unbound money, it is tantamount to a loan, and the treasurer should be liable for misappropriation at the moment that he gave unbound money to the money changer. And Rav Huna said to him, the same is true even if he did not spend the money, and the treasurer is liable the moment he gives the money to the money changer. And since the Tana taught in the first clause of the Mishnah that the money changer is liable if he spent the money, the Tana taught in the latter clause of the Mishnah as well that the treasurer is liable if he spent the money, although he is liable even if he did not spend the money. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 9. Now, Mishnah number 10 here in chapter 3. With regard to one who misappropriates a deposit, right? Simple, you're asked to watch property for someone else. You cast your greedy eye on it and you decide, you know what, I want that for myself. And you take it for yourself, so that is the transgression of misappropriation. So with regard to one who misappropriates a deposit, Beis Shammai say he is penalized for its decrease and its increase. Now, what this has to do with is at what point is he understood to have committed the misappropriation, which is tantamount to robbery. And then, is it the moment he took it, or is it the moment where he rendered it unreplaceable, unreturnable? Right? And if the value of the property that he stole or that he misappropriated changes from the time that he received it to the time when he took it for himself to the time when he rendered it unreturnable, then who is going to in other words, Beis Shammai is saying he bears the loss for all of that. If it increased in value, he's going to have to give the owner the increase in value. If it decreased in value, then he's going to absorb that loss himself, right? So with regard to one who misappropriates a deposit, Beis Shammai say he's penalized for its decrease and its increase. If the value of the deposit decreases, the bailee is liable to pay in accordance with its value at the time he misappropriated it, even though now it's worth less. If it increases in value, he is liable to pay in accordance with its value at the time of repayment. That's according to Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel say, and we almost always paskin like Beis Hillel, the law follows Beis Hillel, he pays in accordance with its value at the time of removal. Now, what is removal? We'll see. Rabbi Akiva says he pays in accordance with its value at the time that the depositor brings a claim before the court. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. Rabbah says in a case of this one who robbed another of a barrel of wine, where initially it was worth 1 dinar, now it is worth 4 dinars. If the robber broke the barrel or drank the wine, that's when he renders it unreturnable, he pays 4 dinars. If it broke by itself, he pays 1 dinar because he didn't render it unreturnable, it just broke. And the Gemara elaborates, what is the reason for the difference? Since if the barrel were intact, it would return to its owner in its original state, and there would be no need to calculate its price. That moment that he drank it or that he broke it is the moment that he actually stole from the owner of the wine. As we learned in a Mishnah, Tractate Bava 93b, all robbers pay in accordance with the value of the stolen item at the moment of the robbery. Here, that is 4 dinars. If the barrel broke by itself, the robber pays 1 dinar. And what is the reason for this? He did not do anything to the barrel now. Why do you deem him liable to pay? Because of that moment that he robbed the other person of it. At that moment, it was only worth 1 dinar. So we learned in the Mishnah that Beis Hillel say, one who misappropriates a deposit pays in accordance with the value at the time of removal. And the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of in accordance with its value at the time of removal? If we say it means in accordance with its value at the time of its removal from the world, right, when he drank the wine or broke the barrel, well, actually, this is difficult from a legal perspective. And the Gemara explains. And with regard to what case is this referring? If it is with regard to a case where there was a decrease in value before its removal, if removal means when he removed it from the world, when it was no longer possible to return it. So if it is referring to a case where there was a decrease in value before its removal, is there anyone who says that the bailee pays the lower price? But didn't we learn in a Mishnah, all robbers pay in accordance with the value of the stolen item at the time of the robbery, and no less than that. And if it is with regard to a case where there was an increase in value before its removal, that is the opinion of Beis Shammai, as the one who misappropriates a deposit always pays the higher value. But that is not the opinion of Beis Hillel. Now we're on 43b. Rather, it is obvious that Beis Hillel hold that the bailee pays in accordance with its value at the time of removal from the owner's house. Now, isn't that the time of robbery? Not necessarily. I.e., the time of the misappropriation. And the Gemara asks, if so, shall we say that Rabbah stated his opinion in accordance with the opinion of Beis Shammai and not the opinion of Beis Hillel? And the Gemara rejects this. Rabbah could have said to you, with regard to a subsequent increase in the value of the misappropriated deposit, everyone, meaning Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, agree that the bailee pays in accordance with its value when the deposit was destroyed, when it became impossible to return it. Where they disagree, it is in the case of a subsequent decrease in the value of the misappropriated deposit. And Rob explains, Beis Shammai hold that misappropriation does not require loss. Meaning, once you misappropriate, you become liable even if the owner ends up not losing anything. And even if the deposit remains intact, his legal status is that of a robber from the moment that he misappropriates the property. And therefore, when the value of the misappropriated deposit goes down, when its market value goes down, it is decreasing in his possession. Therefore, he pays in accordance with its value at the time of the misappropriation. And Beis Hillel hold that misappropriation does require loss. And only when the deposit decreases in value after the misappropriation is the bailee liable to pay. And therefore, when the value of the misappropriated deposit decreases, it decreases in the possession of its owner. Therefore, he pays in accordance with its value at the time that it was damaged, as opposed to the time when he took it. Now, the Gemara asks, but according to that explanation concerning this law, It is concerning this law that Rava says misappropriation does not require loss. So according to that, shall we say that the opinion that Rava stated is in accordance with the opinion of Beis Shammai? Rather, with what are we dealing here? It is with a case where the bailee removed the barrel to stand upon it and bring fledglings from a nest in a tree. He didn't misappropriate the barrel in order to take its contents for himself. He just moved it so that he could, within his storehouse, we said this a few days ago, just so he could stand on the barrel and remove some fledglings from a tree. Perhaps he was even performing a mitzvah of shooing away the mother bird when he removed the fledglings. And so he's just moving the barrel in order to perform that mitzvah. And they disagree with regard to one who borrows an item without the knowledge of the owner, right? Remember that Rabbi Kiva says you're not considered to have returned an item that you misappropriated until you tell the owner that you did that. Now, Beis Shammai hold the legal status of one who borrows an item without the knowledge of the owner is that of a robber in terms of his level of responsibility. He is accorded the legal status, that legal status, the moment he moves the barrel. Wasn't his barrel. He didn't have a right to move it in order to stand on it. And therefore, when the value of the misappropriated deposit decreases, it decreases in his possession now that he's misappropriated it when he used it for his own needs, even if he wasn't planning on taking it and stealing it. Consequently, he pays in accordance with its value at the time that he borrowed the barrel. And Beis Hillel hold the legal status of one who borrows without the knowledge of the owner is that of a borrower, not a robber. And only when the barrel is broken is the bailee rendered liable to pay. And therefore, when the value of the barrel decreases, it decreases in the possession, the legal possession of its owner, because this one who borrows it hasn't removed it from the possession of the owner. And consequently, he pays in accordance with the barrel's value at the time that it was damaged, not its value at the time that he used it for his own purposes. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. And the Gemara asks, but according to that explanation concerning this law, it is concerning this law that Rava says the legal status of one who borrows an item without the knowledge of the owner, according to the opinion of the rabbis, is that of a robber in terms of legal responsibility. So shall we say that the opinion that Rava stated is in accordance with the opinion of Beis Shammai? Rather, contrary to the previous explanations, the terms decrease and increase are not referring to changes in market value. They are referring to the decrease in the value of the animal when its wool is sheared, and the increase in its value due to the birth of offspring. And here, with regard to the enhancement of stolen property, and here it is with regard to the enhancement of stolen property that they disagree. Beis Shammai hold the enhancement of stolen property belongs to the one who was robbed, and Beis Hillel hold the enhancement of stolen property belongs to the robber, because he's already on the hook to replace what he took, its value at the time that he took it, and plus the penalty. And that's what and because he's liable that way, it's technically in his possession now. And so any increase, like it has a lamb, while after he's stolen and obtained legal possession of it, it would accrue to him and not to the original owner. Now, that sounds a little like, wait a minute, aren't we getting a little too legalistic? I mean, obviously the guy stole a sheep from the owner, and then the sheep had a lamb. Both the sheep and the lamb belong to the owner. Yeah, but you have to think about the unintended consequences of what seems like an obvious ruling. Beis Hillel ruled this way because when you sort of trace the law down the line, this is ultimately going to be a better protection to the original owner. And it is with regard to the issue that is the subject of the dispute between these Tanaim that they disagree, as it is taught in a Baraisa. With regard to one who robs another of a ewe, right, female sheep, if he sheared it or it gave birth, the robber pays the owner for it and for its fleece or for its offspring. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says the stolen property returns to the owner in its current state. And the Gemara comments, the language of the Mishna is also precise, as it is taught that Beis Shammai say he's penalized for its decrease and its increase, and Beis Hillel say he pays in accordance with its value at the time of removal. When recording the opinion of Beis Shammai, the Mishnah does not state he is penalized for its rise and fall in value, and the Gemara affirms learn from the wording of the Mishnah that they disagree with regard to fleece and offspring, not rising or lowering in the market value. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. I'm only seeing one comment from Tom. During the periods when Jews and others were trading over vast distances, they devised ways to extend credit along and at the ends of their trade routes. Absolutely, right? I was talking about it like, that things are in many ways are so different financially from what they were in the ancient world. And in other ways, they're very similar, right? So people who were running caravans, trade routes, particularly getting spices from India and eventually from China, which were incredibly valuable in Europe, and the Middle East was the center of that kind of commerce. So it's very dangerous, right? If you needed to buy those things, you had to take your money a very long way and then bring those very valuable goods back all the way. And along that vast route, marauders, brigands, thieves could, pummel the caravan. So who's going to bear all that risk? And how can we extend credit and pay for things, when they didn't have computers, and credit cards, etc. And they devised very extensive, well understood, well regarded credit systems. And Jews were definitely at the forefront of that kind of system. Because in many places they weren't allowed to own land, and so they were in these mercantile trades, and Jews were sort of all related to each other and spoke the same language, even though they lived very far apart, were sort of perfectly placed to create those credit systems. And so Jews have been involved in kind of that financial business, as long as anyone can remember. And it was good for the Jews, but it was also very good for the world because it enabled trade at a time when trade would have otherwise been very, very difficult. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again Saturday night after Shabbos ends here in LA. No class tomorrow, Friday, because of work on the movie. Regular time on Sunday, and then Monday through Thursday next week. It looks, and I'll post it on the Facebook page, but it looks like the class is going to be 90 minutes later than usual at 7:30 p.m. Pacific, Monday through Thursday next week. Have a great